Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on a topic that's super relevant for all you developers out there, Strapi's Media Library.
It's a game changer, really.
Oh, absolutely. I
Right.
mean, managing media assets can be a real pain, especially when you're working on complex Strapi projects, images, videos, documents. It can get overwhelming fast.
That's where the media library comes in. It's built right into Strapi, no extra plugins needed. So it's there, ready to roll from day one.
That's awesome. So no more fiddling around with separate systems or clunky workarounds. Everything's just like centralized within Strapi.
You got it. And it's accessible in both development and production environments, which is a huge plus for testing and deployment.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
But okay, for those who are new to Strapi or maybe haven't explored the media library yet, could you give us a quick rundown of what it is and why it's such a big deal?
Sure, think of the media library as your central hub for all things media in your Strapi projects. You upload, manage, and organize every single digital asset there, images, videos, audio files, documents, you name it.
So it's like having a super organized digital librarian who's available 24/7.
Exactly. And here's the best part. It's seamlessly integrated with Strapi's Content Manager. So you can easily insert any asset directly into your content types, whether you're building a blog, an e-commerce site, or a complex web app.
That's pretty slick. No more jumping through hoops to get those assets where they need to be.
Nope. It's all streamlined and super efficient.
Okay, I'm sold. But let's talk about the actual uploading process. Is it a drag and drop kind of thing, or are we stuck with those old school file browsers?
Strapi's got you covered on both fronts. You can drag and drop files directly into the media library super easy, especially if you're just dealing with a few assets.
Love the drag and drop. It's just like the modern day equivalent of magic.
Uh-huh, pretty much. But here's where it gets really cool, especially for developers working on larger projects. You can also upload via URL.
Wait, upload via URL. Tell me more about that.
Imagine you've got a client who sends you a Dropbox link with a ton of images, or you need to grab assets from a CDN. Instead of downloading everything locally and then re-uploading, you just paste the URL directly into Strapi. It pulls those assets right in, no fuss.
That's a serious time saver.
Mm.
I can see that being super useful for large projects or when you're working with remote teams.
Absolutely. You can even paste multiple URLs, each on a new line, for batch processing.
Okay, that's next level efficiency.
Yeah.
But let's walk through the entire upload process step by step.
Sure. First, you hit that Add New Assets button. You've got two options, drag and drop your files or browse your computer.
So far, so good.
Once you've selected your files, Strapi handles the upload in the background.
Simple enough.
Hmm?
But what about metadata? You know how important it is to keep things organized and searchable.
Absolutely. Strapi lets you add all that essential metadata right from the upload window. File names, alternative text, captions.
I was hoping you'd say that. Metadata is key for accessibility and SEO, so we're not just throwing files into the void, we're giving them context and making them searchable.
Exactly. And here's a pro tip. You can add more assets to the upload queue even while the first batch is processing. So if you forget a file, no worries.
Okay, I'm loving this workflow. It's like Strapi's anticipating our every need. But before we move on, I have to ask, what types of files can we actually work with? Is it limited to just images and videos, or can we throw in other formats too?
The Strapi Media Library is incredibly versatile. It handles pretty much anything you throw at it, JPEGs, PNGs, GIFs for images, but it also supports SVGs. And for video, MPEG, MP4, QuickTime, AVI, FLV, the whole gang's here.
Okay, so we're covered on the visual front, but what if we need to manage audio?
No problem. Strapi supports MP3, WAV, and OGG.
Okay, so all the standard audio formats are in the mix. But what about documents? Can we upload things like PDFs or spreadsheets?
You bet. Strapi supports common document formats like CSV, ZIP, PDF, XLS, XLSX, and even JSON files for our data-loving folks.
Wow, so it really is a one-stop shop for all our media needs.
Mm.
This is starting to sound like a game changer for managing assets in Strapi.
It really is. But uploading is only half the battle, right? We need to be able to find those assets quickly and efficiently.
You're reading my mind. We've uploaded all these files, images, videos, documents, but now what? Is it just a giant, unsorted digital mountain? How do we actually find anything in this media library?
Don't worry, Strapi has some really powerful tools to keep things organized. First off, you've got filters. You can filter by type image, video, audio, etc., as well as by creation date or update date.
Filters are a lifesaver, especially when your media library starts to grow. But what about sorting?
You can sort by upload date, name, or update date.
Okay, so we can organize our assets chronologically or alphabetically. That's helpful.
And here's where it gets even better. You can customize your view.
Ooh, customization. I like the sound of that.
Exactly. You can switch between a list view or a grid view, adjust the entries per page, and even set a default sort order.
So we can tailor the view to our specific preferences and workflow.
Exactly. And on top of all that, there's a text search bar right at the top. Just start typing in what you're looking for, and Strapi will instantly filter your library.
That's a lifesaver, especially when you're on a tight deadline and need to track down a specific asset fast. It's like having a superpowered search engine just for your media files.
It's all about making your life easier and your workflow more efficient.
I'm all for that. But okay, we've talked about searching, filtering, sorting. It's all great for getting that bird's eye view. But what happens when we need to zoom in and manage individual assets? What kind of control do we have there?
This is where things get really interesting. Strapi gives you granular control over individual assets. You just click the edit button and it opens up the details window. It's like a command center for that specific asset.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What can we do in this details window?
You can delete the asset, download it, or copy the link to share it, but there's more. For images, you can actually crop them right there without needing any other software.
Wait, built-in image cropping? That's amazing. No more jumping between Strapi and Photoshop just to make a quick crop.
Exactly. And of course, you can update all the metadata right there in the details window. Change the file name, tweak the alt text, add a more descriptive caption, whatever you need.
So we have complete control over every aspect of that individual asset.
Yep. And here's a feature that can be really handy. You can replace an asset file while keeping all its metadata intact.
Okay, that's brilliant. So if you need to update an image with a higher resolution version, you don't have to re-enter all the metadata. Strapi just keeps it linked to the asset, even if the actual file changes.
Exactly. Strapi is all about making things as smooth and efficient as possible. But there's one more key aspect of the media library that I want to touch on, and this is where it moves beyond just basic file management and becomes a strategic tool for developers.
Okay, you've got my attention. What's the secret weapon?
Folders.
Folders. Okay, I'm not sure I see how folders are. Like revolutionary.
Don't underestimate the power of folders. In the Strapi Media Library, they're not just about keeping things tidy, they're about creating a system, a hierarchy, that reflects how you actually use your media assets in your projects.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. So it's not just about randomly dumping files into folders. There's a deeper level of strategy involved here.
Exactly. Think of your folder structure in the media library as the blueprint for how your content is organized and delivered on your website.
Okay, that makes sense. So a well-organized media library leads to a well-organized website.
Right. A well-thought-out folder structure can have a huge impact on things like site performance, user experience, and even SEO.
Whoa, hold on. We're talking folders affecting SEO now. I'm intrigued. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's talk about how folder management actually works in strapping.
It's pretty intuitive. You can create new folders, rename them, delete them just like you would on your computer. You can even create a whole hierarchy of folders within the media library, just like nested folders on your desktop.
Okay, so we can nest folders to our heart's content. But what about moving assets between folders?
Easy. You can drag and drop assets between folders just like you would on your computer. And if you need to meet a whole bunch of assets at once, you can select multiple files and move them as a group.
So no more tedious cut and paste nightmares.
Nope, it's all super smooth and efficient.
I'm liking this more and more. But I think it would be helpful to have a concrete example. Can you paint a picture of how this folder structure might look in a real-world website?
Sure. Let's say you're building an e-commerce site. Instead of just having a massive images folder, you could create separate folders for product images, lifestyle shots, banners, and so on.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Keep those categories nice and organized. But how does this actually impact the website itself?
Imagine a user visits a product page. Their browser needs to fetch the images for that product, right? If those images are all neatly organized within a product images folder, it makes the whole process more efficient.
Ah, I see. So it's all about creating clear pathways for those assets to travel. It's like optimizing the delivery route.
Exactly. And this can have a ripple effect on your website's overall performance.
Right, because faster image loading means a snappier user experience, which can lead to happier customers.
Exactly. And it can also have an impact on SEO, which is something we can dive into later. But first, I think it's important to talk about how these folders work with Strapi's permission system because security is just as important as organization, right?
Absolutely. Let's unravel the mysteries of permissions and folders next.
So Strapi has this really powerful role-based access control system.
Okay, I'm familiar with role-based access control, but how does that actually play out within the media library?
Well, you can define specific roles like administrator, editor, viewer, or even custom roles. And then you can assign different permissions to each of those roles within the media library.
So, like an administrator might have full control, they can upload, edit, delete, move assets, the whole 9 yards,
Hmm.
while an editor might only be able to upload and edit certain types of files, and a viewer might, well, only be able to view the assets.
Exactly. It gives you that granular control over who can do what, which is so important for security, especially when you're dealing with sensitive content or you're working in a collaborative environment.
Right, because you don't want just anyone messing around with your precious media assets.
Exactly. But it's not just about who can do what with the assets themselves. You can actually restrict access to entire folders based on roles.
Ooh, folder level permissions. That's interesting. So, for example, you could have a folder specifically for like client data or confidential documents,
Right.
and you could set it up so that only users with the administrator role can access that folder.
Precisely. Editors and viewers wouldn't even see it in their media library view. It's like it doesn't exist for them.
It's like having a secret vault within your media library, guarded by Strapi's permission system.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sold. But I'm curious, how do we actually set up these permissions? Is it a complicated process?
It's surprisingly straightforward. You just go to the roles and permissions section in Strapi's admin panel, and you can define the specific permissions for each role. You can get really specific, like whether a role can create new folders, crop images, replace assets, all that good stuff.
So you can fine-tune those permissions down to the individual action level. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, Strapi gives you a lot of flexibility there.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about image optimization. We touched on it earlier, but I'm eager to hear more about how we can make those images work harder for us in terms of both performance and SEO.
Image optimization is absolutely critical, especially in today's world where everyone expects websites to load instantly. Large image files can be a real drag on performance, so it's important to optimize them before you even upload them to Strapi.
Right, because those big, bulky images can really slow down page load times, and nobody wants to wait around for a website to load.
Exactly. So we're talking about things like resizing images to the dimensions they'll actually be displayed at on the website and compressing them to reduce file size without sacrificing too much quality.
Makes sense. Smaller files, faster loading times. Are there any specific tools or techniques you recommend for image optimization?
Oh, there are tons of great tools out there, both online and offline. TinyPNG is a popular one, ImageOptim, and there's a newer one called Squoosh, which is pretty cool. It gives you a lot of control over the compression settings.
Okay, so lots of options to choose from. But image optimization isn't just about performance, right? You mentioned SEO earlier. How does image optimization play into that?
Well, search engines like Google, they love fast websites. So when your images are optimized and they load quickly, it can actually help improve your website's ranking.
Okay, so it's a win-win. Faster websites for users and better SEO. But I'm wondering about the different image formats. We talked about Strapi supporting a wide range of formats, from JPEGs to WebP, but is there a preferred format for optimal performance?
WebP is definitely the rising star when it comes to image formats. It offers superior compression compared to JPEG and PNG, which means smaller file sizes and faster loading times.
Okay, WebP for the win.
If possible, yes. But you always want to double check browser compatibility because there are some older browsers out there that might not fully support WebP.
Good point. We don't want to alienate any users with cutting-edge image formats.
Right. But beyond choosing the right format, there are other image optimization techniques we can leverage within Strapi.
Like what?
Remember how we talked about the built-in image cropping feature?
Yeah, it's a really handy tool for quickly cropping images without leaving Strapi.
Well, cropping can also be a really effective optimization technique. By cropping out unnecessary parts of an image, you can significantly reduce its file size.
Oh, I see. So it's like a little performance haircut. Trim away the excess baggage and let those images fly.
Uh-huh, exactly.
Okay, this is all great stuff. It's amazing how much we can do to optimize our images within Strapi. But I'm also curious about responsive images. You know how important it is to deliver the right image size to the right device. Does Strapi have any built-in features for that?
Strapi doesn't have like a dedicated responsive image generation feature, but it gives you the flexibility to implement your own solution.
Okay, so it's a bit more of a DIY situation, but at least Strapi gives us the tools we need.
Exactly. You can use the image cropping functionality to create multiple versions of an image at different sizes, and then use your front-end framework or a dedicated image optimization service to serve up the appropriate image based on the user's device.
So it's like creating a library of images optimized for different scenarios and then letting our front-end code decide which image to use.
Ex-
Okay, I'm getting the hang of this. But earlier you said that folders can actually impact SEO, and I'm dying to hear more about that. How can something as seemingly simple as folders influence our search engine rankings?
Well, search engines like Google, they look at your website's structure and organization to try to understand what your website's about. And a well-organized media library with clear folder names and descriptive file names, it sends a signal to Google that your content is, well managed and relevant.
So it's like we're presenting a well-organized library to Google. They can
Yeah.
easily find what they're looking for, and they appreciate the structure.
Exactly. And it's especially important for image SEO. When you use descriptive file names and alt text for your images, it helps Google understand what those images are about, which can lead to better rankings in image search results.
Okay, so it's all about aligning our folder structure with our content strategy and our SEO goals. But beyond folder names, are there any other factors we should consider when it comes to SEO in the media library?
Absolutely. The file names themselves and the alt text for the images are super important. You want to use keywords that accurately describe the images so that Google knows what they're about.
So instead of using generic file names like image1.jpg or product-photo.png, we should be using more descriptive names like redrunningjuice.jpg or stylish-leather-jacket.png.
Exactly. And then for the alt text, you want to provide a short, accurate description of the image using relevant keywords whenever possible. Alt text is also important for accessibility because it helps screen readers describe images to visually impaired users.
Got it. So thoughtful file names and alt text can help us win on both the SEO front and the accessibility front.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Okay, this is all incredibly valuable information. It's amazing how much thought and strategy goes into something as seemingly simple as a media library. But speaking of strategy, I'm curious about asset versioning. Sometimes we need to revert back to an older version of an image or a document. Does Strapi have any built-in features for that?
Strapi doesn't have like a full-blown version control system, but you can achieve something similar using the replace media feature that we talked about earlier.
Oh, right, that
Yeah.
feature that lets us swap out an asset file while keeping all the metadata intact.
Exactly. So if you need to revert to an older version of an asset, you can just upload the older file and use the replace media option to like swap it out with the current file. It's not true version control, but it can be a handy workaround.
That's a clever trick.
Hmm.
So even though Strapi doesn't have a dedicated version control system, it gives us the flexibility to manage those revisions in a way that works for us. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to talk about performance considerations. We've talked about optimizing individual images, but what about the overall performance of the media library itself? Are there any tips or tricks we can use to make sure it's running smoothly, especially when we're dealing with large libraries like thousands of assets?
Performance is definitely something to keep in mind, especially with larger data sets. One of the most important things is to make sure your server has enough resources, like RAM and processing power, to handle the load.
So it's like any other web application. It needs a solid foundation to run smoothly.
Right. And you also want to make sure your database is optimized. Strapi uses a database to store all the media assets and their metadata.
So we need to make sure our database is properly indexed and tuned for performance.
Exactly. And you can also explore things like caching to speed up asset delivery. Strapi has built-in support for caching, so you can configure it to meet your needs.
Caching, always a good idea when you're dealing with frequently accessed files. But are there any best practices we should be following within the media library itself to keep things running smoothly?
One important best practice is to avoid unnecessary uploads. Every time you upload a file, Strapi has to process it, generate thumbnails, store it in the database. So if you're constantly uploading and deleting files, it can put a strain on the system.
So be mindful of our digital footprint within the media library. Only upload what we truly need and avoid creating a cluttered mess.
Exactly. And if you do end up with a massive media library, you might want to consider using external storage like Amazon S3 or Google Cloud Storage. Strap lets you configure these services as your primary storage location, which can help offload some of the burden from your main server.
That's a great tip for those high-volume scenarios. It's like giving our media library a spacious walk-in closet.
Exactly.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of great stuff so far. But are there any potential pitfalls or challenges developers might encounter when working with the media library?
One common mistake I see is people forgetting to set file size limits. Strapi lets you set limits on the maximum file size that can be uploaded, but you need to configure it properly.
Right, because if you don't set those limits, someone could accidentally upload a massive file and bring your server to its knees.
Exactly. So it's important to set those boundaries.
Hmm.
And another potential challenge is dealing with duplicate files.
Ah, the classic problem of digital clutter,
Yeah. If you have multiple users uploading similar assets, you could end up with a lot of redundancy in your media library.
which wastes storage space and makes it harder to find what you need. Any strategies for preventing or mitigating this duplication issue?
One approach is to encourage users to search for existing assets before uploading new ones. Strapi's search functionality is pretty powerful. You can also look into plugins or custom solutions that can help automatically detect duplicate files.
That's a great tip. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Okay, before we move on to our final thoughts, I want to talk about backups. You know how crucial it is to have a solid backup strategy just in case something goes wrong.
Hmm.
Does Strapi offer any built-in backup features for the media library?
Strapi doesn't have a specific backup feature just for the media library, but you can easily back up your entire Strapi application, including the media files, using standard database backup tools.
So it's more about integrating media library backups into our overall Strapi backup strategy.
Exactly. And when you're backing up your media library, it's important to think about the size of your files and how often you need to back them up.
Right, because media files can get pretty big.
Yeah, so if you have a lot of large media files, you might want to explore things like incremental backups, which only back up the changes that have been made since the last backup.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Incremental backups are definitely a lifesaver when you're dealing with large, constantly evolving data sets.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're nearing the end of our deep dive, but before we wrap up, I'm curious about any future developments or trends you see on the horizon. You know, those cutting-edge features that might shape the future of media management within Strapi.
One trend I'm really excited about is the increasing integration of AI and machine learning. Imagine a media library that can automatically tag and categorize your assets, suggest relevant content, maybe even do some image recognition.
That's amazing. It's like having a super intelligent assistant that can handle all those tedious media management tasks. It's like the media library of the future. Are there any specific AI-powered features you're particularly excited about?
One feature I think would be super useful is automatic image captioning. You upload a photo, and Strapi automatically generates a descriptive caption using relevant keywords and recognizing what's in the image.
That would be a game changer. No more manually writing captions for every single image. But beyond image captioning, are there any other AI-powered features that could revolutionize the way we work with media in Strapi?
Personalized content recommendations. Imagine a media library that can analyze user behavior and suggest relevant assets based on their past interactions. This could be huge for e-commerce sites, for example, where personalized product recommendations can drive sales.
It's like having a personal shopper built right into our media library.
Exactly.
Okay, before we get too carried away with those futuristic visions, are there any more down-to-earth improvements you'd like to see in the media library?
One thing I think could be improved is the integration with external media editing tools. Right now, Strapi has some basic image editing features, but it would be great to have tighter integration with, popular image and video editing software.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It would be great to have a seamless workflow where you can edit your assets in your preferred external tool and have those changes reflected back in the media library.
Exactly. It would streamline the editing process and make it easier to maintain consistency across all your assets.
Okay, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about the media library, but before we wrap up, I want to hear your final thoughts. What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
The Strapi Media Library is so much more than just a simple file storage system. It's a powerful tool that can transform your content management workflow, boost your website's performance, and even give you an edge in SEO.
Well said. It's about using the media library strategically, not just treating it as an afterthought.
Exactly.
Okay, one last question before we sign off. Do you have any final words of wisdom to share with our listeners?
As developers, we're constantly striving to automate things, make things more efficient. But what if we could take that a step further and create a media library that's not just organized, but intelligent? A library that can anticipate our needs, suggest relevant content, even learn from our interactions.
That's a thought-provoking question. It's like the media library of the future, a true partner in content creation.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe one day that vision will become a reality.
I, for one, am excited to see what the future holds. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Strapi Media Library. We hope you learned some valuable insights and are ready to unleash the full power of this incredible tool.